In total, the 54 cities across China that have subway systems are carrying about 650 billion in debt. That's more than the entire annual GDP of countries like Sweden or Belgium. To put it in perspective, if you split that money evenly among China's 1.4 billion people, each person would get around $467. Sure, but that's only if China still has that kind of population. Running a subway in China is expensive, with very limited ways to make money. They've been operating at a loss for years and have become a huge burden on local finances. In reality, many subway systems in China run every day with barely any riders. Trains operate on schedule even when they're nearly empty, burning through huge amounts of money. Take Shenzhen, the most profitable subway line in China. It still lost 4.6 billion last year. That's around 14 million in losses every single day. And keep in mind, Shenzhen has the highest ridership in the country with about 13.7 million daily trips. Most cities don't even come close. So it's no surprise that they're bleeding money year after year. So if subways are losing this much money, why is China still building them like crazy? Well, there are a few reasons. First, building subways is a great way for local governments to stimulate the economy and rack up political achievements. Subway projects usually have three big goals: boost the economy, ease traffic, and polish the city's image. Stats show that every 14 million spent on subway construction can generate about 37 million in GDP growth. So even if smaller cities know their ridership isn't enough to support a line, they still pour money into building subways. Why? Because it looks good on the books, it's a vanity project, but in the end, it just leaves local governments drowning in debt. The second reason? Overly optimistic planning. Officials tend to overestimate future urban growth and real estate potential. Take Foshan, a city with nearly 10 million people. In theory, it should have plenty of subway riders, but in reality, Line 3 skips over the densely populated district and instead detours through sparsely populated areas. Why? To boost property prices for newly built housing projects. The line was designed around real estate, not real riders. But the result? Less than 10% capacity usage. Even with heavy government subsidies, the line lost over 14 million for 2 years in a row. Chongqing's another example. Back in 2005, its subway system was just 13 kilometers long. By 2024, nearly 500 kilometers. That insane expansion was based on projections of population growth and urban sprawl. But one of its lines, the B line, only sees about 19,000 riders a day, yet it still racks up massive maintenance and operation costs. Third, subways in China are way too tied to the real estate market. Once housing prices fall, local governments lose revenue and can't keep covering subway losses. Last year, the average fiscal self-sufficiency rate across China's 31 provinces dropped again, down by 0.6 percentage points. And in the first quarter of this year, public budget revenue fell while spending rose by 4.2%. That's a clear sign. Local governments are facing growing financial shortfalls. One major reason? The real estate slump. Typically, land sales make about 45% to 50% of local government income, and land sales depend heavily on how well homes are selling. When the housing market is booming, demand for land goes up, prices climb, and governments cash in. Developers also build commercial zones around housing projects, which raises land values even more. It's a win-win for city officials and real estate companies. But when housing tanks, the whole system collapses. This explains why cities keep building subways, even when there's no real need. It's not about ticket sales. The real money comes from real estate development along subway routes. But once property stops making money, the subway systems suffer too. Shenzhen is a prime example. If the real estate market can't recover, this whole land-based revenue model falls apart. And without it, subways turn into long-term money pits. Cities that once grew rapidly, like Foshan and Zhuhai, not only built subways but also poured money into suburban trams. But when the property market crashed, the financial pressure forced them to halt these projects. Until a new, equally powerful growth engine shows up, subway operations won't be turning around anytime soon. One blogger pointed out that the deep ties between Shenzhen Metro and real estate giant Vanke are a perfect example of the subway economy crisis. In 2017, Shenzhen Metro Group spent $9.2 billion to become the largest shareholder in Vanke. Since then, the two formed a close alliance based on one principle: wherever the subway goes, Vanke builds. This partnership was once considered a textbook example of urban development and real estate synergy in China. But by 2024, the housing market was in freefall. Vanke's sales dropped sharply, and so did profits. The company reported that in just the first half of 2025, it had to repay more than $2.88 billion in bonds and interest. As its biggest shareholder, Shenzhen Metro had to inject cash again and again. Since 2024, they've pumped in about $1.7 billion. But with local home sales still sluggish, their entire strategy of making money off subway-linked real estate is now in serious trouble. Fourth, there's the issue of uneven resource distribution across Chinese cities. Local governments often push for subway lines blindly, even when it doesn't make economic sense, and that leads straight to financial losses. In recent years, cities in China have been locked in fierce competition for talent, and having a subway? That's become a badge of honor, a basic checklist item for any city that wants to attract people and businesses. Once a subway opens, it usually triggers a boom in nearby housing, office buildings, and commercial development. More people move in, property prices climb, investment flows in, and the whole area gets a lift. That's why, even though building subways costs a fortune, many cities are still all in. But now, even top-tier cities like Shenzhen are struggling to sell new housing. That hits the subway plus real estate model hard. Property along subway lines just isn't generating the profits it used to. And the entire system for making subway projects financially sustainable is under serious strain. This subway drives development model is based on one big assumption: that the city can keep attracting people and companies. That's what pushes land values up and makes the whole economic model work. But the reality is harsh. In this race between cities, only a few come out ahead. Most of the talent and businesses end up choosing the big players: Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, or rising stars like Hangzhou, Wuhan, and Chengdu. Many second and third tier cities invested huge sums into subway construction, only to find that not much actually changed. They ended up with losses on the books and not much else. Even some of the newer first-tier cities, which temporarily saw a population boost, are now hitting a wall. The housing boom is over, and relying on home sales to cover subway deficits is getting harder and harder. Fifth, subways are really, really expensive to build and run. In China, building high-speed rail costs about $14 million per kilometer. That's already high, but subways? They cost way more. On average, building 1 kilometer of subway can run anywhere from $70 to $111 million. And in top-tier cities, it can exceed $278 million per kilometer. Why so expensive? Cities are densely packed, so subways have to be dug underground, way harder than just laying tracks on the surface. Plus, there are tons of existing buildings. That means land expropriation, demolitions, and sky-high construction costs. And once the subway's done, the bills keep coming for repairs, train scheduling, station management, safety checks, passenger services, you name it. Some bloggers are saying it flat out: China's golden era of subway building is over. The latest news: several cities, including Chengdu, Nanjing, and Hefei, have suddenly hit pause on subway projects. Some lines were approved but never started. Others are still waiting for approval. The message is clear: subway expansion is about to slow way down. In the last 10 years alone, China built more rail transit than Western countries did in over 100 years. In online, people are saying there's another reason: China is nearing the end of its urbanization phase. Birth rates keep falling. Many subway lines being used today might be the last ones the country ever builds. For cities without a subway, there might never be one. That's all for today. If you enjoy our content, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with a friend. We appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time.